Hey guys, so that time of the month again where I do my take of a meta-analysis. We're based on the top 25 ranked players on Dueling Book. I used ygeoscope.com to find their 20 most recent replays that were publicly available and outlined what decks they were playing, as well as what the deck's win percentages were based on whether they won or lost the die roll, and how they fared depending on the deck's playstyle they faced. If you want to see these videos on a monthly basis, then make sure to like the video and subscribe. So let's get started. So this time around in February, post Blazing Vortex, we had 494 matches included, where I had to exclude a few matches because they concluded before any card was played, so you can roughly attribute 20 matches to the same player. Of course, the same player generally tended to play the same deck for all of their matches, but not always. Now this time around, the decks that the top 25 players played were super diverse. We actually see Dragon Link resurging as the most played deck, followed by a respectable number for Virtual World as well. The use of Drytrons among the top players this month seems to have declined a bit too. And then you have a whole bunch of decks that had roughly around the same amount of matches played, so in order they include Zodiac variants, Infernoble, ABC, Adamancipator, Altergeist, Dinos, Dogmatika Invoke Shaddoll, Mathmech, Mermail, and Sky Striker. There were a few more decks in the other category, which was below 4%, and this included decks like Burning Abyss, Numeron Subterror, and Tri-Brigade Lyrilisk. On the bottom right here, you will also see that about 4% of the matches among the top 25 players involved the Dogmatika engine, and only 1% for Eldritch, which is a big surprise. Now, if we were to quickly compare this graph to last month's meta-analysis, we saw that Drytron was the most popular deck, and with Virtual World made up about half of the matches included. So this time around, definitely a bit more diverse. Now our top 25 players won a little over 75% of the matches, which is impressive and probably not surprising. And most of them played aggro decks like Dragon Link, Virtual World, Drytron, Infernoble, etc. About 1/5 of the decks played by our top players involved control decks like Zodiac variants, Altergeist, and Dogmatika Invoked. And lastly, we had a small sprinkle of beatdown kind of decks like ABC, Mathmech, and Dinos. Now if I were to separate out the match win percentage based on these three playstyles, they look pretty similar actually, although control decks seem to have the slightly higher win percentage of 80 versus around the 75% for the other two styles. And finally, I always end on the 5 most played decks and break down their win percentage, although this time around I'm only going to do 3 decks because after that the decks were all played in similar but small frequencies. Anyways, to start with Dragon Link, it had an absolutely ridiculous 81% win rate among the matches played by our top players included in this video, which is much higher than the 62% it showed in my last month's meta-analysis. When it won the die roll, it won 87% of its matches, and it can still bring out a pretty strong board presence with a Heretic Bounce, Savage Negate, a Leviathan Rip, and who knows what else. Its win percentage of 73 when the deck lost the die roll is still really strong. In terms of the match win percentage against different playstyles, it was very balanced and it did well regardless of the type of deck that it went up against. Then we have Virtual World, which won a respectable 75% of their matches. This is essentially the same win rate as my last month's analysis of Virtual World, so keeping it steady. It had an 81% win rate when winning the die roll and going first and set up their 1-2 VFDs, and 68% when it lost the die roll. In terms of win rate against different playstyles like Dragon Link, it did have a pretty balanced layout, around 73 to 76% versus control and aggro decks, and having better success against beatdown decks, although this was only based on 6 matches. And lastly, we have Drytrons. Its win percentage of 64 is certainly lower than around the 75% it had last month. Of course, a lot of players have been tuning up their side decks specifically for this deck, like Alley of Justice Cycle Reader and Droll Lockberg, and it's definitely had a big target on its back, and people seem to have learned how to play against this deck very well. It did have a slightly higher win percentage when it won the die roll at 68% versus 61% when it lost the die roll, and it seems to have struggled against aggro decks for this month's analysis, although keep in mind of the really small sample size, especially for the win rate against beatdown decks, as this is only based on 4 matches. Alright guys, so that's it for another round of my meta-analysis. It is time for the February format. Hope you found that useful, and make sure to subscribe so you can see these breakdowns on a monthly basis. Take care guys.